Welcome to IFS versus solid axle. So here I have a Land Cruiser 70 series, which is our solid axle prop. And here we have a Ford Ranger, which is the IFS prop. But before we get into all the details and all the pros and cons, all the stuff that you want to know before you head out and buy something, let's first understand the main difference. Land Cruiser first. This is just a prop. There are many solid axle vehicles out there. Okay, what we have here is what's known as a solid front axle, also known as a live axle, solid front, and a beam axle. I don't know too many people call it a beam axle, so let's just refer to it as a solid or a live axle. What this means is wheel attached at each end. When this side dips down because of articulation, the other side will go up. The whole beam moves like this. It's fixed. That's how it works. It's solid. The CVs on this vehicle, on either side where the wheels are, it allows for this kind of movement. It doesn't allow for that movement because that's in the axle. That's the main difference. There are different components. As you can see, it looks pretty crude and it looks pretty strong. Independent front suspension, IFS, also known as IRS if you have it on the rear. This is the Ford Ranger. This is what's known as IFS, also known as wishbone suspension. How did I get the term wishbone? By the lower control arm and the upper control arm. They kind of look like a wishbone. So here we have the axle coming out and there's the CV. Now the CV has two ends to it. This allows for that movement and a little bit of this movement because everything in here kind of moves around. When you drive over things, as you can see here, one side will move up independently or down to the other side. So in this case, this is hitting a log or a stump that's going up. This side remains down, working independently from each other. So there's a rock on this side, drive over the rock, come back down, this side stays down. It doesn't move like the live axle. As I've already explained, IFS vehicle, there is also IRS, not to be confused here. So IFS, independent front suspension, IRS, independent rear suspension. Which vehicles have that? Well, I'll name two really quick. You have the Pajero and you have the Y62 Patrol. Both of those have independent front and rear suspension. So what I'm talking about here can refer to independent rear as well. Handling, that's the first thing we'll cover. Old technology, this is new technology. Live axle, in comparison to an IFS vehicle, some people will say they handle like a boat, which is pretty true. IFS handles way better, way better. Moving on from handling, we have comfort. IFS, way more comfortable than a solid axle vehicle. Like I said, they handle like a boat in comparison to an IFS vehicle, and IFS vehicle are way more comfortable. When you actually hit a rock or something on a gravel road, one side will absorb it, the other side won't ever move. In a solid axle vehicle, the whole thing will move. There'll be some kind of movement, and even worse, if they are leaf sprung, even worse. The same goes for gravel road, highway, and even off-road. Off-road comfort, IFS is still way better. To a degree. When we start talking big lifts and big holes, big washouts, then a solid axle vehicle will have more flex and therefore win the comfort race there because there's less movement in the whole body of the vehicle. Whereas an IFS vehicle, we can only lift it so high, the whole car is going to be moving because it's lifting wheels. But all in all, IFS, way more comfortable. Clearance off-road, underbody clearance. An IFS vehicle is actually better because a live axle vehicle or a solid front, the diff pumpkin hangs down pretty low. You got the control arms, all that stuff there. Whereas an IFS, everything's tucked up. The differential's up in the body and there's movement on the CV axles which allows the wishbones to be down and there's nothing in the middle. So there's more clearance on an IFS vehicle than there is on a solid axle vehicle. If you want more clearance on a solid axle vehicle, the only way you're going to beat an IFS is by putting portal axles in on the end of your axle, which will lift the whole axle off the ground even higher, yet keep the wheels down. Wheel alignments. You can get a better wheel alignment on an IFS vehicle than a live axle vehicle. And that's because you have all the different adjustments. You've got caster and camber, it's all adjustable. However, you can knock your wheel alignment out easier on an IFS vehicle than on a solid axle vehicle. Which is stronger? I'm not an engineer, so let me just start by saying that. But what I will say is the solid axle, live axle, is stronger than an IFS. And here's my reasoning why. Independent front suspension vehicles, there's a lot of components. They're all little thin bits and pieces, all working together to create this super comfortable ride. Should you have a decent impact on the front, something is sure to snap. If you give it too much of a hard time, something is sure to snap because there's so much small thin bits and pieces in there. Lower control arm, upper control arm, the CV, the struts, and everything else that's in there. There's a lot of stuff in there. Solid axle, live axle vehicle, it's way stronger built. It's all bigger metal parts. That's my argument for this being stronger than that. Another thing to take into account, if you have a decent impact, you'll probably destroy the solid axle, the live axle. However, your chassis is more than likely going to stay intact. IFS, on the other hand, everything there is attached to the chassis directly. So if you do have a decent impact, you're probably going to damage the chassis as well. One other thing to keep in mind, IFS vehicles and solid vehicles, they also design differently. Now, most solid axle vehicles are older vehicles, so the whole frame, the whole chassis is going to be stronger. IFS, like I said, is newer tech. The vehicles are made to crumble. So in an off-road situation, the vehicle itself is weaker on an IFS than it is with a solid axle, in general. Vehicle weight. IFS vehicle, the components are a lot lighter than the solid axle cousin. So if you want a lighter vehicle, better fuel economy, better handling, better comfort, that's your guy there. We just covered which one's lighter. Now we're going to cover which one can carry the most weight. A live axle vehicle is designed to carry weight. It's designed to be robust. It's old tech, but it works. It holds a lot more weight. IFS vehicles, like I've already explained, they're designed for comfort and handling. They are not designed to carry weight. You can make them carry weight, but they're not designed for it. These will be stronger. So if you want to carry weight, solid axle. Diff Centres. In most cases in general, a live axle vehicle has much stronger components. The diff centre, the axles, the CVs, as opposed to an IFS vehicle. The diff centres on these are smaller and generally weaker. Now the biggest off-road strength difference on both these two vehicles. An IFS vehicle, those CVs in there, they are super weak in comparison to a CV on a solid axle. So a CV translates to constant velocity joint. That is the bit that sends drive out to your wheels and has movement, so they can move. On a solid axle vehicle, it has one piece going out and then it connects to the wheel, and that is the bit that moves around. On an IFS vehicle, it has two of those joints that can move around, so they can pivot. So they have ball bearings on each side, so there's more movement, which also makes it weaker, and they're generally thinner. And if you put them on a horrible angle, they tend to go bang. On a solid axle vehicle, you can't put it on an angle unless you turn the wheel. So you can put IFS CV joints on stress two different ways. By having a horrible angle with an incorrect lift kit or too much lift, or turning and trying to drive. On a solid axle vehicle, there are no rubber CV boots. There are on this type of vehicle, on an IFS vehicle. And let me show you something. So I'm going to pick up this stick here. Now if I'm driving around in my Land Cruiser with a solid front diff, or a Jeep, or an old Land Rover or whatever, if I see this stick sticking up here, I don't care. I'm just going to drive into it because that can't do anything. However, I'm not going to do it to this vehicle. Same scenario, stick comes, you're going to have to avoid it, slow down, drive around it or whatever. If you drive straight into this, this is likely to pierce through your CV boot. And once you've got a hole in your CV boot, that's when contaminants, water, that kind of stuff gets in there, messes around with all your grease, and then you got problems. So which has the better flex off-road? That one. solid axle vehicle, live axle, has better flex. IFS vehicles, you can only lift them so far, and they don't flex too well with the front end. And if you mess around with too much on the front end to lift it up as well, you can actually lose flex on your vehicle. Strangely enough, you can actually lose flex. The sand dune factor. You're heading towards a hill, a sand dune in this case, and you want to drive up it. You want to hit it at speed because otherwise you won't make it. So here we go, solid axle vehicle, live axle, wheels are on the side. You hit the dune, you go up and you go over. Done. IFS vehicle. We're hitting the same sand dune at the same speed with the same mission to get up. We hit the sand dune. What happens? You get suspension compression. So you know how I said the differential or the underbelly on an IFS vehicle has more clearance? Well, yes it does, but when you hit this dune at speed, you're going to get suspension compression. The wheels on the end of these wishbones are going to go up, the body of the vehicle is going to go down. So you're actually going to lose clearance. If you're going to hit a sand dune, you're far better hitting it in a solid axle vehicle than you are on an independent front suspension vehicle. The ground will come up and meet you pretty quick if you hit it too fast. Look, the same thing can happen on the bull bar. We're not talking about the bull bar, we're talking about the underbelly of your vehicle, just to clarify. One of my favorite differences for a solid axle vehicle, and this is one of the main reasons why I have a solid axle vehicle, is when you modify your suspension. You want to lift the vehicle up, you want to fit bigger tires on it. Solid axle wins by so far because an IFS vehicle, the wheel arches are generally smaller. There's a lot more involved to lift it, and if you lift it too high without the right components, then your CV angles come into play, and that's when stuff can break. Not only to mention, you put bigger tires on an IFS vehicle, they're constant velocity joints, the CVs, they're weaker, they're thinner, they can't really handle turning bigger wheels as well as a solid axle vehicle. Solid axle vehicle, you can lift this thing to 12 inches if you wanted to. It'll drive absolutely horrible if you did, but what I'm saying is you could lift it to 12 inches. This, you could not do it. Okay, and no one's going to lift a vehicle to 12 inches, it's just an exaggeration. But let's say 4 inches on this is a lot easier than lifting this at 4 inches without compromising a lot of components. So that is the main thing to keep in mind, I think, depending on the full driving you do. That's all I can think of. If you can think of any other reasons, put them down below. So what is best? What's best in your mind? For me, and for everyone, I think it comes down to what you want to use the car for, or the vehicle for. If you want to go into heavy modifications, carry a lot of weight, robust vehicle, remote touring, I would suggest a vehicle with a solid front and a solid rear. However, if you're not into all that crazy stuff and you just want a practical vehicle with a practical suspension lift that's still capable of going to places this thing can go to, then IFS is the way to go. Now there is a limitation for this vehicle making it to the same places as this vehicle can get to, and that is when you say overload this vehicle and you overload this vehicle, this will handle it better than the IFS vehicle. You're putting a lot of stress on all your componentry, as you are in this one as well, but this is a bit weaker. So horses for courses, what do? That's up to you. So comment down below, which one do you think is better? And what else would you like me to talk about? Comment down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Patreon.com/RonnieDale. Subscribe over here and check out steel versus alloy rims.